Have you ever felt like you are watching a grotesque spectacle, a performance disguised as normality, where the absurd is the only constant? Pay close attention to what happens around you. A click on your phone and images of buried children, ruined cities, screams of pain echoing through blood-soaked streets appear. It is the raw reality, the brutality of human existence being exposed in high definition. But, in the blink of an eye, everything changes. A vibrant, colorful advertisement emerges, full of fake smiles and empty promises. Buy happiness, acquire self-esteem on a credit card, forget the anguish with a weekend trip. It's as if suffering and consumerism have made a silent pact to keep us hypnotized. Pain has become the backdrop, consumption the official distraction. And we go on, passive spectators of a theater where tragedy and comedy alternate in an endless cycle. You feel that discomfort, don't you? That deep, almost physical unease, as if something is fundamentally out of place. As if we are alive only in the biological sense, but dead inside. Dead on purpose, truly dead. Because we repeat patterns we did not choose, we live narratives we did not write, and we move forward even without knowing why. Albert Camus understood this feeling with razor-sharp clarity. He didn't write to comfort. He wrote to disturb. There is but one truly serious philosophical problem, he declared. This statement isn't about statistics or a single dramatic act. It speaks to that quiet, restless question that surfaces in the middle of the night. Why keep going when everything feels so empty in a world so absurd, so meaningless? Here, we can expand Camus' idea beyond its literal reading, pointing to the collapse of authenticity, the slow erosion of our true self. Every time we give up who we are to fit into a society designed to numb us, we lose a part of our essence. This quiet surrender, though invisible, can be devastating, but Camus does not stop at the denunciation. He proposes something infinitely more challenging: to face the absurd with open eyes, not to flee, not to invent comforts, not to cling to metaphysical explanations, just to accept reality as it is, cold, incoherent, indifferent, and yet to live, to choose to live, not for hope, not for promise, but for rebellion. This video is a call, not to believe in something, but to wake up, to think, to feel, and perhaps for the first time, to accept that life does not need an external meaning to be profoundly significant. Meaning is not ready, waiting for you somewhere. Meaning is something you build with courage, with presence, with lucidity. Perhaps by diving into this philosophy, you will realize that living without a cosmic purpose is not a tragedy. It is, in fact, the greatest act of freedom a human being can perform. And that is exactly why this journey needs to start now. Most people are fading away slowly, in suits, smiling for selfies, meeting goals, and being praised for it. They live, but they are not alive. They breathe, but they do not feel. They are functional, but they are not whole. And the scariest part is that this death, the death of the true self, shocks no one. On the contrary, it is rewarded with stability, approval, and likes. Camus understood this before many. When he spoke of the deepest philosophical question, he was pointing to something beyond physical acts. He was pointing to the slow, invisible collapse of authenticity, the quiet fading that happens when you abandon who you are to fit into a mold, when you silence your own questions just to appear well-adjusted, when you trade your curiosity for productivity, your essence for a social role. How many times have you caught yourself acting like a character, performing a script that someone wrote for you? Waking up, working, smiling, being polite, hiding fatigue, silencing anger, ignoring fear. Life turns into a loop of automatic gestures, decisions made by inertia, and feeling swallowed dry. And with each repetition, something inside you fades away, slowly, silently, until the day you look in the mirror and no longer recognize yourself. This is the silent collapse that Camus exposes. An existence without passion, without awareness, without revolt. And he calls it cowardice. Because it is easier to settle for a lukewarm life than to face the terror of emptiness. Easier to pretend everything is fine than to dive into the deep doubt. What if none of this makes sense? But here is the key. Recognizing this inner death is the first step to breaking the cycle. The simple fact that you are listening to these words now already shows that something inside you resists. That there is still a spark, a restlessness, a refusal to accept a half-life. And it is from this refusal that true revolt begins. However, before we talk about the conscious rebellion against this daily death, we need to understand the scenario in which all this happens. A cold, indifferent, silent world, where meaning is not given. It is in the collision between the human search for meaning and the silence of the universe that what Camus called the absurd is born, and that is exactly what we will explore in the next part. If this content is making sense to you, click the subscribe button and subscribe to the channel. Thank you for your support. Imagine waking up one day and realizing that everything you believe to be solid, your goals, your beliefs, your certainties, begins to crumble. Nothing dramatic happened, no tragedy, just silence. An emptiness settles between you and the world. You ask yourself why, but there is no answer. Just noise, just routine, just the mechanical sound of life moving on, indifferent to your anguish. It is precisely here that Albert Camus inserts his notion of the absurd, the clash between the human yearning for meaning and the incomprehensible silence of the universe. We want answers, we need narratives, purpose, direction. But the world simply is. It does not respond, does not explain, does not justify. And this lack of response is unbearable for many, but inevitable for all. Camus does not claim that the world is meaningless out of malice or injustice. It is not cruel. It is indifferent. And this indifference is what makes it absurd. Because we, conscious beings, endowed with a desire for logic and coherence, are condemned to exist on a stage where none of those things are guaranteed. It is as if we are trying to read a book that was written in a language that does not exist. The frustration does not come from the content, it comes from the absence of translation. The absurd is not in the universe, nor in us, but in the relationship between the two. We are meaning-making machines thrown into an environment that offers none. And this, according to Camus, is an inescapable fact. It is not a theory, it is not a hypothesis. It is the basic condition of conscious existence. And what do we do in the face of this? Most try to escape. We lose ourselves in distractions, ideologies, promises of salvation. We seek to numb this existential pain with consumption, religion, status, even toxic optimism. Because looking directly at the absurd requires brutal courage. It demands the ability to hold our gaze on the void without blinking. But Camus believes that it is precisely in this confrontation, in this moment of shock, where the ground disappears and everything seems to collapse, that something powerful can be born. Because if the universe has no meaning, then the only way to continue is to create our own. And this can only happen when we stop fleeing, stop lying to ourselves, stop seeking external answers. It is at this point that we reach the crossroads. In the face of the absurd, we have three possible paths, three human responses to the absence of meaning, and it is about these choices and their consequences that we will talk in the next part. When we finally realize the absurd, when we stop seeking comfort in illusions and face reality without veils, we are thrown into an existential fork. Albert Camus presents us with three possible exits from this brutal impasse between the human thirst for meaning and the indifference of the universe. Three responses to the void, and each of them reveals not only what we think of life, but how much we are willing to live with honesty. The first option is total surrender. The conclusion that if life has no meaning, then it is not worth continuing. It is the extreme act of an individual who finds no reasons to endure existence and prefers to end it. Camus firmly rejects this exit, not out of moralism, but because he sees it as a gesture of weakness, a premature resignation in the face of a game that has not even begun. Ending one's life is not confronting the absurd, it is running from it. The second exit is what Camus calls philosophical escape, and this is perhaps the most common and the most dangerous. It is when, in the face of the absurd, the individual invents an artificial meaning, clings to a belief, an ideology, a promise of salvation to numb the anguish. Here come dogmatic religions, closed systems of thought, messianic utopias. It does not matter if it is the promised paradise or the perfect revolution. The mechanism is the same, betraying reality to feel secure. But this kind of security comes at a high price, the denial of one's own lucidity. And for Camus, there is no greater dishonesty than lying to oneself just to be able to sleep at night. Thus, the third way remains, the absurd revolt, the hardest path and the most liberating. It is when the individual accepts the absurd as a permanent condition of existence, does not try to explain it nor flee from it, just lives with it, faces it without despair, lives without appeals to transcendental hope, acts without expecting cosmic rewards. It is the bravest act a human being can commit, to continue living even knowing that the universe does not care. This revolt is not aggressive. It is not against the world. It is a yes said to life despite everything. It is to live with intensity, with presence, with awareness, knowing that each gesture is finite, each moment is unique, and that nothing beyond the now is guaranteed. It is to transform the void into a stage for freedom. It is to make life an act of continuous creation, even without a script. But how is it possible to live like this? How to sustain this revolt without falling into despair? Camus answers this question with a powerful symbol, a mythological figure that becomes a metaphor for the human condition, Sisyphus. And it is about him, the eternal condemned one, who pushes his stone up the mountain, that we will talk in the next part.